The call came at 11:47 p.m. Security needed her immediately. Duke George Hampton, the man who'd treated her as invisible for 2 years, was drunk in the car park about to drive. Mariana Sanchez, single mother and night cleaner, found him broken on the anniversary of his brother's death. She stopped him from making a fatal mistake. The next morning, instead of pretending it never happened, he remembered everything. Then this happened.
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
Hampton Tower rose like a glass monument in central London, its 40 floors housing some of Britain's wealthiest tenants. Mariana Sanchez entered through the service entrance at 7:55 p.m., 5 minutes early as always, scanning her employee badge before heading to the cleaning supply room. 29 years old, exhausted before her shift even began. She'd spent the day at Nikolai's school for parent-teacher conference, then rushed home to make dinner, help with homework, and get her 7-year-old settled with Mrs. Chen next door before the night shift started. 8 hours of cleaning executive offices for £22,000 annually, barely enough to cover their Brixton council flat rent of £950, childcare costs, school expenses, and the constant, unexpected emergencies that came with single parenthood. 3 years since Diego fell from that scaffolding. 3 years of doing everything alone. Louise Page, her supervisor, intercepted her in the corridor. "You were written up again last week, Sanchez. 10 minutes late on Tuesday." My son had fever. I couldn't leave him until excuses don't clean floors. Louise's smile was tight, cruel. The Duke doesn't tolerate unreliability. One more incident and you're terminated. Mariana bit back her response. She needed this job desperately. 20 floors above, Duke George Hampton reviewed quarterly reports in his penthouse office. At 34, he'd inherited the Hampton title at 26 after his father's death, built a commercial property empire worth £200 million, and cultivated a reputation for cold efficiency. No one got close. No one saw weakness. Control in all things. His assistant, Martin Starmer, entered with correspondence. "Your Grace, the building operations report shows..." "The cleaning staff was late again this week?" George interrupted, not looking up. "One employee. Family emergency, apparently." "I don't pay for excuses. Document it." George never learned the cleaner's name. Never saw her face, though she cleaned his office 5 nights weekly. She was simply the cleaning staff, invisible, interchangeable, beneath notice. That night, Mariana scrubbed the marble floors of the executive level on her hands and knees. Around 11 p.m., George walked past her, leaving late from a meeting. His expensive shoes appeared in her peripheral vision, paused briefly, then continued without acknowledgement. She didn't exist to him. Mariana sat back on her heels, watching his retreating form. The Duke of Westbridge, untouchable and cold. She'd heard staff whisper about him, brilliant but isolated, ruthless in business, completely alone despite his wealth and title. She understood loneliness, but his was chosen. Hers was thrust upon her by Diego's death, by economic reality, by a world that made single mothers invisible while demanding everything from them. She returned to scrubbing, thinking about Nikolai, asleep at Mrs. Chen's, about the school field trip she couldn't afford, about the hole in his school shoes she tried to patch. George Hampton lived 40 floors above the world in a penthouse worth millions. Mariana Sanchez lived in a 2-bedroom council flat, counting pennies. Their worlds should never have intersected beyond employer and invisible employee. But Friday night, just 2 days away, would shatter that distance completely. Neither of them knew it yet. Friday night, 11:47 p.m. Mariana had just gotten Nikolai to sleep after a battle over math homework and brushing teeth. She collapsed on their worn sofa, finally able to breathe. Her phone rang. Hampton Tower security flashed across the screen. Her first thought, "I forgot to lock something." Another write-up. "Louise will use this to fire me." "Miss Sanchez?" The security guard's voice was tense. "We need you here immediately. It's the Duke. He's drunk in the underground car park and he's about to drive. Mariana's exhaustion evaporated into sharp focus. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She called Mrs. Chen, who appeared in her doorway within minutes. Go, dear. I'll stay with the boy. The night bus took forever. Mariana's mind raced. Why would security call her? George Hampton had never acknowledged her existence. Why not call his estate manager, his family, anyone else? Hampton Tower's underground car park was eerily quiet when she arrived. The security guard, Thomas, met her at the entrance, relief flooding his face. Thank God, he threatened to fire everyone who tried taking his keys. But you're there every night. Maybe he'll listen. Mariana descended the concrete ramp. The reek of expensive whiskey hit her before she saw him. Duke George Hampton sat on the cold floor beside his silver Aston Martin, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles. His bespoke suit was rumpled, his tie askew, and his face, always so controlled and cold, was streaked with tears. Car keys dangled from his right hand. Your Grace, Mariana said carefully, approaching slowly. I'm going to need those keys. George's head snapped up, eyes unfocused and red-rimmed. He stared at her for a long moment, clearly struggling to place her. I know you. You cleaned my office. Not her name. Even drunk and broken, he didn't know her name. Yes, and right now I'm keeping you from making a terrible mistake. George laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off concrete walls. Everyone stops me from everything. Stop grieving. Stop blaming yourself. Stop being human. He struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously. But Christopher's still dead, and I'm still the one who killed him. The words hung in the air, raw and devastating. George lunged for his car door. Mariana stepped directly in front of him, 5'4" blocking 6'2", but she didn't move. Get out of my way. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me if you kill someone's father, someone's husband, someone's son. Her voice broke, thinking of Diego, of Nikolai growing up without him. I won't let you create another widow, another orphan. George froze, her words cutting through the alcohol fog. His face crumpled. 8 years ago today, I was driving drunk. My brother Christopher was in the passenger seat. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I crashed, walked away with scratches. He died in hospital 3 hours later. George collapsed against the car, all fight draining away. So you see, I've already created orphans. Christopher's 2 daughters lost their father because of me. Mariana gently took the keys from his loose grip. Then don't dishonor his memory by doing it again. Mariana pulled out her phone and called the number Thomas had given her. Martin Starmer, the Duke's estate manager. Mr. Starmer, this is Mariana Sanchez from Hampton Tower. The Duke needs you to come collect him. Underground car park. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She ended the call and sat on the cold concrete beside George, maintaining distance but staying present. Why are you helping me? George asked, his voice small, nothing like the commanding Duke who walked past her without seeing. I don't even know your name. Mariana, my name is Mariana Sanchez. George repeated it slowly as if tasting the syllables for the first time. Mariana. He looked at her properly, truly looked, for the first time in 2 years. I've walked past you hundreds of times. Yes. Never once asked your name. Never said thank you. I had you written up for being late when... He stopped, memory surfacing. When your son was sick. That was you. Nikolai had a fever. I couldn't leave until my neighbor got home from her shift. No accusation in her voice. Just fact. George covered his face with his hands. God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Mariana watched him, this powerful man reduced to tears on garage concrete, and saw not the cruel Duke, but someone drowning in grief he'd never processed. I lost my husband 3 years ago, she said quietly. Construction accident. Diego fell from scaffolding. One moment he was texting me about dinner. Next moment, police at my door. George lowered his hands, listening. Nikolai was 4. He barely remembers his father now, which somehow makes it worse. She wiped her eyes. Grief doesn't follow schedules, Your Grace. It ambushes you on anniversaries, on random Tuesdays, when you smell something that reminds you of them. Tonight, grief ambushed you. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. I've been cruel to you, George said, voice breaking. You deserved kindness, and I gave you coldness because it was easier than feeling anything. They sat in silence, two people wounded by loss, finding unexpected connection in a car park that smelled of whiskey and regret. Headlights appeared. Martin's arriving in the estate car. Professional concern masked his shock at finding the Duke broken on concrete with the cleaning woman. Your Grace, let's get you home. George let Martins help him up, but before leaving, he grasped Mariana's hand with desperate gratitude. Thank you for stopping me, for staying, for seeing me when I never saw you. His grip was tight, sincere. Tomorrow I'll probably regret showing you this, George said, voice rough. I want to pretend it never happened. Don't let me. Mariana squeezed his hand once. I won't. She watched them drive away, then stood alone in the empty car park, wondering if the Duke of Westbridge would keep his word, or if Monday morning would bring the pretending she expected. What happens next will shock you, because instead of forgetting, the Duke does something no one expected. Subscribe now to see how one night of vulnerability transforms two lives, and how remembering changes everything. Saturday morning, 9:15 a.m. Mariana was making breakfast for Nikolai when the knock came. She opened the door expecting Mrs. Chen. Instead, Duke George Hampton stood in her hallway holding flowers, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater she'd never seen him wear. His eyes were clear but tired, and he looked absolutely terrified. Your Grace, George, please. He held out the flowers, simple daisies, not expensive roses. May I come in? Inside her tiny flat, cluttered with Nikolai's school projects, mismatched furniture from charity shops, cheerful chaos of a home filled with love, George looked profoundly out of place. Nikolai stared from the breakfast table, spoon halfway to his mouth. Mom, why is the fancy man here? This is Mr. Hampton, darling. He owns the building where I work. George crossed the room and knelt to Nikolai's eye level. My name is George. I came to apologize to your mother and to thank her for helping me last night when I needed it very much. Nikolai studied him with 7-year-old frankness. Did you do something bad? Yes, I was unkind to your mother for a very long time. I'm going to do better. After Nikolai returned to his cereal, Mariana and George sat at her small kitchen table. He refused tea, his hand shaking slightly. I remember everything, he said without preamble. I don't want to pretend I don't, though that would be easier. He pulled papers from his jacket. I spent the night reviewing building employment records. You've been written up 5 times in 2 years, every single time when Nikolai was ill. Mariana's stomach dropped. Your Grace, I need this job. You're not losing your Louise Page is effective immediately. He slid papers across the table. She's been systematically underpaying your overtime, documenting you beyond company policy, creating a hostile work environment. Mariana stared at the termination notice with Louise's name. I'm offering you her position, building operations manager. Salary £65,000 annually, full benefits, flexible hours, office on the executive floor. You'll oversee all maintenance, cleaning contracts, and building services. The numbers didn't make sense. Mariana blinked, trying to process. Triple her current salary, flexible hours, in office. Why? George met her eyes directly. Because you deserve it. The records show you've been doing half of Louise's job anyway while she took credit. Because you're clearly competent, organized, and care about doing things properly. He paused. And because I want to make amends for 2 years of cruelty. This feels like guilt. It's not just guilt. It's recognition of worth I should have seen all along. His voice was steady, sincere. I'm asking you to trust that I mean this, that I'm not performing charity, but offering you what you've earned. Mariana looked at the contract, her name typed officially. the salary that would change everything for her and Nikolai. I accept, she said quietly, but I'm watching to see if you mean it. Fair enough. I'll spend however long it takes proving I do. 2 months passed. Mariana excelled as operations manager, solving maintenance issues George's previous manager had ignored, renegotiating supplier contracts that saved thousands, implementing staff training programs that improved morale throughout the building. George watched her transform Hampton Towers operations with quiet admiration. He found himself inventing reasons to stop by her office. Questions about building systems he already knew the answers to, requesting updates on projects that didn't need his oversight. Staff noticed the change. The Duke smiled now, remembered names, asked about people's families. The ice that had surrounded him for 8 years was slowly thawing. One afternoon, Mariana mentioned casually that Nikolai was nervous about his school play. He had the lead role in The Lion King and was terrified of forgetting his lines. "When is it?" George asked. "Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. She didn't expect him to remember. Thursday evening, the school auditorium was packed with parents and siblings. Mariana sat in the third row, phone silenced, pride and nerves warring in her chest. A figure slid into the empty seat beside her. George, slightly breathless, still in his work suit. "I'm sorry I'm late. Meeting ran over. Did I miss anything?" Mariana stared. "You came?" "You said Nikolai was nervous. I wanted to support him." George's presence drew stares from other parents. His face occasionally appeared in tabloids. His title carried weight, but he ignored them completely, focused entirely on the stage. When Nikolai appeared as young Simba, singing "I Just Can't Wait to Be King," with enthusiastic, if slightly off-key gusto, George leaned forward with genuine engagement. After the performance, Nikolai spotted George and ran over, still in costume with his mane askew. "Mr. George, did you see? I didn't forget any words." George knelt, his expensive suit incongruous among casual parent attire. "You were magnificent, a natural performer. Your mother must be very proud." Nikolai beamed. "Mom, can Mr. George come to pizza with us? It's tradition after plays." Mariana expected polite refusal. Instead, "I'd be honored if your mother agrees." At the pizza restaurant, loud, chaotic, nothing like the exclusive establishments George frequented, he fit in surprisingly well. He listened to Nikolai's excited chatter about wanting to be an actor, asked genuine questions, laughed at 7-year-old jokes about why the lion couldn't play cards in the jungle. Watching him, Mariana realized this wasn't the Duke performing obligatory charity. This was George, genuinely enjoying their company, relaxing in a way she'd never seen. Later, after Nikolai fell asleep on the bus home, George walked them to their building entrance. "Thank you for letting me be part of tonight." "Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to Nikolai." She paused. "To both of us." George hesitated, vulnerability crossing his face. "I've spent 8 years avoiding connection because I was terrified of losing someone again. But tonight, watching Nikolai's joy, seeing you so proud of him, I realize isolation isn't protection. It's just a slow death." He met her eyes. "I don't want to die slowly anymore." George became a regular presence in their lives. Weekend trips to museums, his suggestion, Nikolai's delight. The Natural History Museum became their favorite, with Nikolai racing ahead to the dinosaur exhibit while George and Mariana followed at a more leisurely pace. He helped with homework at Mariana's kitchen table, teaching Nikolai chess with infinite patience. Mrs. Chen watched these domestic scenes with knowing smiles, whispering to Mariana, "That man looks at you like you hung the moon." But the outside world noticed too. The tabloid appeared on a Tuesday. "Duke's mystery woman, former cleaner, snags aristocrat." The photograph showed them at the Science Museum, George's hand on Nikolai's shoulder, Mariana laughing at something her son said. The accompanying article was cruel. Implications of gold digging, questions about appropriate matches for nobility, speculation about Mariana's motives. George arrived at her office that afternoon, fury in every line of his body, tabloid clutched in his fist. "I'm suing them. Every single publication that printed this garbage. Mariana looked up from her desk calmly. Don't. They're destroying your reputation. Let them talk. I know the truth. You know the truth. Nikolai knows the truth. She stood, taking the paper from his hands. I've survived worse than gossip, George. I've survived real loss, real poverty, real fear. These words can't hurt me unless I let them. George stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Wonder mixed with respect. You're stronger than I ever was. No, just stronger than you give yourself credit for being. That evening, Martin Starmer visited George's penthouse with concerns. Your Grace, the family lawyers are advising caution. The title, the inheritance, the expectations. I've spent 8 years living for a title instead of living for anything real, George interrupted. I'm done letting dead men's expectations control my life. He made a decision that night, establishing the Christopher Hampton Foundation, dedicated to drunk driving prevention and supporting families affected by traffic fatalities. He named Mariana co-trustee, ignoring the scandal it would cause in aristocratic circles. Christopher would have liked her, George told Martins. He believed people mattered more than pedigrees. I forgot that for too long. The foundation announcement made headlines, some supportive, others critical of the Duke's American cleaner having authority over Hampton family money. George's response was a public statement. Miss Sanchez has shown more integrity, compassion, and wisdom than most people born to privilege. Christopher's legacy deserves nothing less. At Mariana's flat that evening, Nikolai asked innocently, Mom, why do people say mean things about you in the papers? Because some people think where you're born matters more than who you are, Mariana answered honestly. That's stupid. George, who joined them for dinner, laughed. Your son is wise beyond his years. He learned it from his father, Mariana said softly. Diego always said character isn't inherited. It's built through choices. George met her eyes across the table. I'm trying to build better. I know, I see it every day. The moment when everything changes is coming, when friendship becomes something more, when walls finally crumble completely. Subscribe now because what happens at the Natural History Museum will take your breath away, and you won't want to miss how this Duke finally learns to love again. 6 months after the car park incident, the Natural History Museum on a Saturday afternoon, their ritual now comfortable and familiar. Nikolai raced ahead to the dinosaur exhibit, his excited voice echoing through the halls. George and Mariana followed slowly through the quieter mammal gallery, surrounded by preserved history. Do you ever regret it? George asked suddenly. Regret what? That night, helping me. You could have ignored security's call, stayed home with Nikolai, avoided all this complication. He gestured vaguely, meaning the tabloids, the scrutiny, the disruption to her life. Mariana considered carefully. Sometimes the most important choices don't feel like choices. They feel like the only thing we can do and still be ourselves. They stopped before a display of ancient wolves, frozen in time, preserved but lifeless. He's lucky to have you, George said, watching Nikolai through the doorway press his face against glass, studying fossils with pure wonder. I know you've had offers, better jobs, better opportunities, but you stayed at Hampton Tower even when I was unbearable because the schedule worked for him. He's my priority, always. I know, it's one of the things George stopped, then forced himself to continue. One of the things I admire most about you. The word admire hung between them, carrying weight beyond simple respect. Mariana's heart raced. George, I'm terrified of this, he interrupted, words rushing out before courage failed. Of feeling something real again after so many years of numbness, of wanting something I might lose, of being vulnerable when control has kept me safe. He turned to face her fully, eyes intense and honest. But I'm more terrified of letting fear make my decisions, of waking up one day and realizing I let something precious slip away because I was too afraid to reach for it. Mariana's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between you blocking my car and sharing pizza with your son, I fell in love with you, with both of you. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I know it's complicated, class differences, my title, the press, our history, but I'm asking if you might feel even a fraction of what I feel, if there's any chance. Mariana kissed him. In the middle of the Natural History Museum, with dinosaur fossils as witnesses, and the distant sound of Nikolai's laughter floating through galleries, she chose vulnerability over fear. The kiss was gentle, searching, asking and answering questions neither had dared voice until now. When they broke apart, both breathless, George rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Nikolai appeared in the doorway, grinning widely. Finally! Mrs. Chen said you were being slow about it. They laughed, all three of them, the sound echoing off ancient stone and glass. George knelt to Nikolai's level. Would it be okay with you if I spent more time with you and your mom? If I became part of your family properly? Nikolai pretended to consider seriously. Only if you promise to teach me to drive when I'm old enough. In a car park, so it's safe. The reference to where everything began made both adults' eyes glisten. I promise, George said solemnly. Then okay, you can stay. 1 year to the day after the car park incident, George texted Mariana, can you and Nikolai meet me at Hampton Tower tonight? 8 p.m. I have something to show you. Mariana was curious but agreed. They arrived at the building, now truly hers as much as his, her office on the executive floor, a symbol of how far they'd come. George met them in the lobby, nervous energy radiating from him. Come with me, please. He led them to the underground car park. Mariana stopped at the entrance, memories flooding back. George, why are we? Then she saw it. The concrete space had been transformed. Fairy lights strung everywhere, casting warm golden glow. A small table set with candles and flowers. More flowers covering the exact spot where George had once sat broken and drunk, where everything had changed. Nikolai gasped with delight. It's like a fairy tale. George took Mariana's hand, leading her to the center of the transformation. His hands trembled slightly. 1 year ago, in this spot, you saved my life. Not just from drunk driving, but from the slow death of isolation I'd chosen for 8 years. His voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You saw me at my absolute worst, drunk, broken, cruel in my history toward you, and you decided I was worth saving anyway. He released her hand and knelt on the concrete. Duke George Hampton on one knee in a car park, just as he'd once sat there in despair. From his pocket, he pulled a velvet box. Mariana Sanchez, I'm not offering you a title or a palace or anything the world thinks matters. I'm offering you me, the man who still struggles with grief, who's learning how to be part of a family, who needs you and Nikolai more than he ever imagined possible. He opened the box. The ring was elegant but simple, a single diamond that caught the fairy lights. Will you marry me? Will you let me be the father Nikolai deserves and the partner you've always been to me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that remembering that night was the best choice I ever made? Nikolai bounced excitedly beside them. Say yes, Mom! Please say yes! Mariana looked at George, this man who'd been so cold, who'd transformed through pain and vulnerability into someone capable of this kind of love. Tears streamed down her face. You're not Mr. Hampton anymore. You're not even Mr. George. You're just George, the man who remembered, who chose to change, who showed up for us every single day. She pulled him to his feet. And yes, I'll marry you, we'll marry you. The three of them embraced in the car park where everything had begun, surrounded by fairy lights and flowers. The concrete transformed from a place of despair into a place of hope. George held them both tight. Thank you for not letting me forget. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to myself. Thank you for not wanting to forget, Mariana whispered back. Security guard Thomas watched from his post, wiping his eyes. He'd been there that terrible night, had called Mariana in desperation. Now he witnessed the ending that night had made possible. Full circle, complete, 3 months later. The wedding was deliberately small, registry office in Kensington, intimate and genuine rather than grand spectacle. Nikolai took his duties as ring-bearer with utmost seriousness, dressed in a miniature suit George had helped him pick out. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears in the front row. Martin Starmer served as George's best man, his initial skepticism long since transformed into genuine affection for Mariana. The guest list reflected their merged lives: building staff from Hampton Tower, Nikolai's teachers, Mariana's friends from the Brixton Community Center, George's small circle of family who'd supported rather than criticized. No press, no tabloids, just people who mattered. The reception took place on Hampton Tower's rooftop, transformed by Mariana's operational genius into a space that felt both elegant and welcoming. String lights, simple flowers, food from the local restaurants Mariana and Nikolai loved, rather than expensive catering. George stood to give his speech, Mariana's hand in his. My brother Christopher loved people fearlessly. After he died, I convinced myself that loving people meant risking unbearable loss. So I stopped loving anyone, including myself. His voice carried across the rooftop. I became the Duke, cold, controlled, separate from anything that might hurt me. He looked at Mariana. Then one Friday night, grief overwhelmed me, and I was about to make the same mistake that killed Christopher. One woman, someone I treated as invisible for 2 years, stopped me, not because I deserved it, but because it was right. Mariana taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that grief honored is better than grief buried, that love is worth the risk of loss. He raised his glass. To Mariana, who chose compassion over resentment. To Nikolai, who taught me that family is chosen, not just inherited. And to everyone here who believes second chances are real when we're brave enough to remember our mistakes instead of pretending they didn't happen. The toast was met with applause and more tears. Later, dancing with Mariana while Nikolai spun with Mrs. Chen nearby, George whispered, "Thank you for not letting me forget that night. Thank you for not wanting to." Nikolai cut in, demanding to dance with both of them. They formed a small circle. Duke, single mother, 7-year-old boy, moving together under string lights and stars. Mariana looked at George and saw not the cold man who'd walked past her for 2 years, but the person he'd chosen to become. George looked at Mariana and saw not the invisible cleaner, but the woman who'd saved him in every way that mattered. And Nikolai, dancing between them, saw what he desperately needed: family, whole and real and permanent. The music continued. The lights glowed. Below them, London sprawled in all its complicated beauty. A city of millions where a single phone call on a Friday night changed 3 lives forever. Sometimes the most important moments arrive as inconvenient phone calls at 11 p.m. Sometimes they require us to risk everything for people who've never seen us. Sometimes they demand we remember our worst moments instead of forgetting them. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to answer those calls, to offer compassion without condition, to remember instead of erase, we find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be. George had thought wealth and title defined his worth. Mariana had thought invisibility was her permanent state. Both discovered that true nobility lies not in what we inherit, but in what we choose to become when someone believes we're worth saving. 1 year after a drunk Duke nearly destroyed everything, he married the woman who'd stopped him. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because it was convenient. It wasn't. But because she'd seen him at his worst and decided he was worth the trouble of redemption. And he'd proven her right every single day since. This is what real transformation looks like. Not perfect people, but broken ones choosing to heal together, to remember instead of forget, to build family from unexpected places. If stories of compassion conquering class, vulnerability becoming strength, and second chances changing everything move you, subscribe now. Because the world needs more reminders that one act of kindness, one moment of choosing to see the invisible, can change lives forever. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories that prove love is always worth the risk.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel.
Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!